CW. You know, few things on the internet.com unite video essayists and the anti-SJW crowd like the CW. In fact, the name the CW, or the phrase like a CW show, is meant to describe bad writing, bad acting, and unnecessary love triangles, unnecessary teen drama, and all manner of nonsense that is featured prominently on the network. But the thing is, there's a narrative going around that the CW got woke and went broke. The CW went full SJW, and that's why they're shutting down, that's why they're in trouble, that's why their ratings are in the tank. However, and I do mean how and then ever, this is just wrong. It's inaccurate, it's not even close, it's not factually based, and I am going to discuss this in an important way on this channel and make you guys, by the end of this, appreciate the CW for what it is. However, we have a sponsor for this video, so we're going to throw it over to the sponsor, then we're going to come back over here and talk about it on the other side. A study involving 1,100 people recently demonstrated that collagen supplements are one of the most effective ways to reduce the signs of aging. This study showed that just taking collagen supplements for 90 days can help with wrinkles, can help with joint and ligament issues, your hair growth, or the appearance and thickness of your hair, and all sorts of other things. And one of the great things about this study is that it ties in beautifully to my sponsor, Health with Justice. This collagen powder is absolutely amazing. You take it, you can get 51% off with my link, healthwithjustice.com. Try it for 60 days, and if you don't feel like you have de-aged to the point where you're satisfied, you just send it back. That's right, take all the powder over the course of 60 days, and if you're not feeling it, if you don't like your baby soft skin, send it to the collagen people and say, no more. Now, the first thing that you need to know about the CW is that it is an amalgamation, a combination of two struggling networks that went away in order to form one cohesive unit that is the CW. Early on, their hits were mostly carryovers from Warner Brothers, like Smallville, like Supernatural, and Warner Brothers, the network, had more hits, more of a track record, I would say, than UPN. Also, UPN was considered by a lot of people to be the black network. They had shows with a lot of black characters, so depending on where you are in the country, depending on what you were into growing up, you actually might have more fond memories of UPN than Warner Brothers in this merger. So if you do, just let me know what shows you actually liked on UPN that I definitely missed and definitely never saw, because honestly, I was not very much into UPN. So what happened was Warner Brothers, which was owned by Warner Brothers, and UPN, which I'm not sure if it was then or is now, well, I know it is now, was owned by CBS, Viacom, and Paramount, you know, however that structure works, the corporate structure. I forget which one is the total, like, on top of everything kind of organization. I'm gonna guess Paramount, because their streaming service is called Paramount Plus, and they formed the CW. Now, a lot of people think that this network begins and ends with the Arrowverse. All the shows, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, Arrow, Supergirl, that combine to make the DC television universe is what people think of now and associate with the CW and associate with getting woke and going to crap. Batgirl is a big example of that. I believe that we covered the trailer for on this channel, but the thing is, the CW was actually much more than that. You see, there was kind of a standard formula on the other networks. Shows typically fit within certain genres, and shows outside of those genres were typically canceled almost immediately, even if they were really good. One of the things that people have taken note of over the course of history is the show Firefly. There was a big movement to bring it back because Fox aired the episodes out of order. They aired the first episode halfway through the time of the first episode because there was a baseball game or something that went into extra innings or overtime. I don't remember exactly which, and that show was never given a chance, and it ended up being canceled as its fan base was rebuilding or building itself for the first time on the reruns of that show. That wouldn't have happened with the CW. The CW would have kept the show like Firefly going along. That being said, Firefly was created by Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon kind of burned bridges with Warner Brothers after he took Buffy to UPN, and that's a whole story for another time that we're never going to get into on this channel because we're not going to do such a deep dive into the entertainment sector of the networks or whatever. But the thing is that the CW often always had lower ratings despite the fact that they would have what I would call more innovative shows. I think Smallville, bringing Superman in high school to television, was a daring risk. It was an expensive show, and even though it was a holdover for Warner Brothers, the CW carried the torch, and that show ultimately ended up lasting 10 seasons. Supernatural, also aimed at a younger audience. I think it was a fantastic show, especially 1 through 5. Very well written when it was handled by Kripke. It got a little off the rails, but still fun in its latter 10 seasons, but as you can imagine, a show going on for 15 years might be a little long in the tooth. That being said, they also had other interesting shows like The 100, which was an adaptation of a book series that again was a sci-fi show that you don't really find on other networks, and if you do find it on other networks, like that show Terra Nova, which had dinosaurs, whatever, on Fox, that was canceled almost immediately, and this lasted a full 7 seasons. Now, they ruined it by the end of it. Bellamy did not get a good ending, and I'm still heartbroken about that, but this was a show that actually posed complicated moral questions, gave us a complicated protagonist of the show, and was an interesting and innovative way of putting something on TV that we weren't technically familiar with. You have to give credit where credit is due. The expansions of sci-fi on television have been few and far between, especially on network television. However, the CW would go into genres like horror, they would go into genres like sci-fi in order to bring things to fruition that you just couldn't get on other networks, and this led to a lot of low budget, not very good representations of that, but it also found niches, found markets, and let other networks see that these topics were viable, these genres could be made into television shows, and that helped improve television overall if you're not somebody who's just a fan of your standard shows that every other network has ongoing for a million seasons all the time. Now, the next thing that people often bring up to ding the CW is the low ratings. They got woke, their ratings went in the toilet, now they gotta cancel all the shows, now they're in tremendous debt, and that just proves if you get woke, you go broke. But the thing is, while this is evidence, as in you can point to this number and say this number is lower than the ratings at CBS, Fox, ABC, NBC, the CW always had lower ratings than all of those networks. This was the norm for the CW. This is one of the reasons why part of their business model was the fact that they were going to spend less per episode in producing these television series. This is one of the reasons why all the CW shows are shot in Canada, because it is cheaper to shoot those shows in Canada in order to compensate for the fact that their ad sales would be lower because their ratings were lower. On top of that, the CW also had a very innovative business model that was kind of before anybody else, and they deserve credit for it. Back in 2010, 2011, the CW actually struck a deal with a company, you might have heard of it, called Netflix. This is one of the reasons why, among all the TV shows that you can find on Netflix, a huge chunk of them are CW TV shows. You can find all the seasons of Supernatural, The 100, and a bunch of other CW shows that aren't licensed out to other streaming services because technically their ownership is wrapped up in other companies outside of Warner Brothers or CBS. Perfect example of this, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. There's a weird Fox ownership issue there, therefore they're on other services. But overall, if it's a straight up CW show, it is typically featured prominently on Netflix. Unless, of course, it has a Fox connection or a DC connection. But again, overall, there's lots of CW shows on there, and CW was one of the first networks to do this. And because they were selling their shows on the side to Netflix, this allowed them to experiment more, and this also allowed them to not care so much about the ratings, thus making the point that just saying they had low ratings when, by the way, all TV ratings are going down comparatively to where they were because of streaming, and the CW always had low ratings compared to other networks, isn't necessarily indicative of the fact that this went woke and therefore got broke. Now, I'm going to pause here to point out the fact that the CW was producing woke content. A lot of that content was in fact garbage, but you have to understand the world outside of your political perspective and not fall into the trap of saying that all these things got woke and went broke, when in reality, most of the time, things go woke, and yet Hollywood keeps spending more and more money on that messaging because these activists believe in that messaging, and enough of these things make money despite the fact that they're woke that it doesn't really matter, because what you gotta face up to, the reality is, we're going into a time period where foreign markets are more important than the domestic market, or becoming more important than the domestic market. So anti-American messaging sells over there, even if you don't think it really works out over here. So the CW, yes, it got woker. Yes, the writing got worse in a lot of places. But in reality, the real thing that hurt the CW is that they had a business model that was no longer applicable, and they were overly invested in the superhero genre, which might sound crazy because superheroes are the biggest thing of all time ever. But when you're making superhero shows on shoestring budgets, and then all of a sudden you have Disney Plus dropping WandaVision and all these Marvel shows that look like they're as good as movies for the most part, bad CG here and there. They're dropping shows like Star Wars shows that, again, look like they're good enough to be in a movie, or at least have the budgets for movies. You can't really compete with that when you're doing horrible CG as featured in The Flash and all these other crappy visual effects that are just not that interesting. 22 episode structures don't lend themselves to low budgets with high special effects. That's just a fact. Now, it wasn't just competition from without that was killing the CW. There was also problems from within that made their business model obsolete. You see, the CW was one of the most innovative networks in that they struck that streaming deal with Netflix, thus allowing their shows to gain cult followings through Netflix, which would hopefully produce ratings in the network when they were airing the new episodes, but still produce revenue because they were selling the rights for that to be streamed on Netflix. However, that is not the way the streaming market works. It's not 2010 anymore. It's not even 2015 anymore. It's not even 2018 anymore. CBS, Paramount, the parent company, which I'm pretty sure, 90% sure, is the parent company of half the network, and Warner Brothers both have started their own streaming services that they're heavily invested in. And one of the things that you need when you do a streaming service is to have a huge backlog of content. So Warner Brothers is taking all of their shows back from Netflix and putting them on HBO Max. So there's no reason, if you're a CW person, that you think you're going to get the revenue that you're going to get from without the company, when you're getting that revenue, or that revenue is being diverted in order to draw people in more to HBO Max. The same thing is true with Paramount Plus, their streaming service. Any of the shows that they had the license to are being put back on that service. Therefore, the CW has nothing to sell. Therefore, they're more reliant on their television ratings. And as we talked about before, considering their business model is obsolete of doing these low budget shows with high concept or innovative concept, because other networks are producing higher budget and better looking shows in the same category, the CW is up you know what creek without a paddle. Look, I'm not here to rain on anybody's parade. I'm not here to tell anybody that they're wrong, except for the people whose parade I am in fact raining on, except for the people who I am directly telling that they are in fact wrong about this. But the thing is, a lot of people try to fit every single story into their ideology, and they end up sometimes advocating for things that in reality, if they actually took a step back and examined them, hurt their actual interests. The CW falling is not a victory against the wokeness or anything like that. Just because Batgirl and these DC Arrowverse universe shows that have become overly wrought with woke messaging are no longer going to be put to the screen, doesn't mean you should all jump up and down and cheer this scenario, because in reality, the CW was an innovative network. In reality, the CW is a thing from an era where you could find more shows from more different networks on fewer streaming services, and the fall of the CW actually coincides with the more standardization of television into this Netflix style streaming format, and in the exclusive era where none of these networks partner up to do anything. They just hide behind a paywall and charge you money to watch the content that you were able to get at a one-stop shop like Netflix or on Hulu or on Amazon Prime Video. The birth and the spreading of all these different streaming services, even though you might have your favorite here or there, just makes it more difficult and more expensive for consumers to watch the content that they're actually interested in, because instead of going behind one paywall at one streaming service that has a lot of the stuff that you want to watch, all the different networks are essentially starting their own streaming services, meaning that you would just have to spend an exorbitant amount of money to watch the content that you actually might want to watch. Every time there's a hit on a streaming service that I don't know about or I don't even have, because so many come up out of nowhere, I end up getting upset, because essentially I gotta either pirate it or pay money to watch it. And if this becomes a cultural touchstone, I'm basically on the outs with that because it's behind a new paywall. It's behind something else. And that leaves us more separate in our society because we're not all watching the same thing. We can't all easily access the same things. What we're ultimately going to end up doing is be more fragmented in our entertainment, which means we're more fragmented in our culture, which has the downstream effect of leaving us more fragmented in other places. Because while there are a lot of people who are celebrating the fall of the CW, while there are a lot of people who are rooting for the CW to fail, in reality, this is one of the ultimate monkey's paw wish scenarios, because what is ultimately going to end up happening is that the same networks that weren't innovating, that were all producing very much the same shows, are the ones who are grabbing all this interesting content, some of it really bad content, but some of the shows were interesting on the CW, hiding it behind their own paywalls, and what they're going to produce in the future is more known IPs, more reboots, more stuff that used to be interesting that is just going to be redone with references and woke messaging, and overall, the content experience, the television experience, is going to be worse for it. Sometimes having a network that has lower ratings, that has different standards, that has lower budgets, can lead to more innovative shows, and that's something that was proven out by the CW. The fact that they were willing to take risks, the fact that they were willing to take gambles, the fact that they weren't invested too much in any of these shows unless it became a hit, then they amped the budget while still keeping it lower than other budgets, was a good thing for creation and for content and for media overall. And celebrating its fall because you don't like Batgirl is basically throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Now, I know I'm not the first content creator to bring this up. I know I'm not the first content creator to talk about this from this perspective. I remember one of the guys, as soon as it originally broke that the CW was in significant trouble months ago when I was going to make this video the first time, actually talked about how this wasn't a get woke, go broke scenario, but I recently stumbled upon articles about how the CW is basically selling for negative money because it's $0 plus there's going to be a bunch of debt attached. And I saw the slate of shows that they were canceling, and I decided that I wanted to talk about it because this is the network that I actually did watch some of the shows on, not all of them. Everybody calm down. I never got into Riverdale, never got into some of that other nonsense, never got into that vampire whatever show, the Twilight something whatever. But I'm just saying it is something to think about, and sometimes you need to take a step back in order to understand that you are committing to something ideologically because you're hearing a lot of people talk about it, when in reality, if you broke down what you actually wanted from your content creators or what you actually wanted from the television industry, it's a dead 100% bad sign. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me via the support links in the description box of this video. This has been me talking about the CW's fall. Till next time.